Hello and welcome to another Building Code Division Code Update Training presentation. This presentation will cover technical changes to the energy, mechanical, and fuel gas portions of the 2021 Oregon Residential Specialty Code, the ORSC. We are pleased to make this presentation available to our local government partners and other customers. We look forward to working through the updates with you. There are two main goals of this presentation. The first is to provide a broad view of updates in the 2021 ORSC for chapters 11 through 24. The second is to identify the significant technical changes made to the 2021 ORSC regarding energy, chapter 11, mechanical, chapters 12 through 23, and fuel gas, chapter 24. We understand you may have questions over the course of this presentation, so we have set up a master email address to field your technical content inquiries. Our team plans to organize and offer Q&A sessions in the near future to address your submitted technical change inquiries. To ensure you receive notification of these sessions, visit our homepage and click the Email Updates button located in the upper right corner of the upper ribbon. You have probably already heard the introductions to our fantastic structural and fire life safety technical team members. So we'd like to take a minute and introduce you to the energy technical team. Mark Heiser is a licensed mechanical engineer. He has designed everything from a small drive-through coffee shop right here in Oregon to an extensive U.S. Embassy compound overseas. He came to the Building Code Division over 10 years ago and has more than 30 years of HVAC design experience. He takes lead responsibility for technical support, code development, and interpretations for Oregon's mechanical, energy, and REACH codes. He also leads the execution of any executive orders that come our way. Mark serves on the ASHRAE 90.1 Committee, our currently adopted commercial energy code, and the ASHRAE 228P Committee, a forthcoming standard which looks to establish a method of evaluating zero energy building performance. As such, Mark will be delivering the Code Update Training presentation for Chapter 13 of the Oregon Structural Specialty Code, the OSSC. Chapter 13 contains our commercial energy code provisions. Now, I'm Kelly Thomas. I have over 25 years of experience in education in the built environment. I led the Nevada Governor's Office of Energy programs relative to energy efficiency, including the adoption of the 2018 IECC. I've also served as the Executive Director for the U.S. Green Building Council Nevada chapter and was a Senior Project Manager for both an energy auditing company and an energy retrofit contractor. Over the course of a decade, I served in many roles for home builders, including architectural design and even land development. I came to Oregon Building Codes Division in the summer of 2018, and along with Mark, I'm also responsible for the technical support, code development, and training for Oregon's energy-related codes. This also includes any executive orders that come our way. Well, enough about us. Let's get going. And remember, we are always here to support your technical energy code inquiries. For this training video, here is the general format. Building Code Division revisions are shown as blue underline for additions and red strike-through for deletions. A couple changes made by the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, the RMSB, are in pink underline for those additions. The IRC revisions are shown as purple underline for additions and are relevant in chapters 12 through 24 of this presentation. Before we dive into the technical provisions, there are a few broad energy code policy perspectives that we want to recognize. The first is continuing Oregon's leadership. In 1974, Oregon adopted our first statewide energy code. This was the first of its kind in the United States. In more recent years, Executive Order 1720 was signed in the fall of 2017. This requires that the Building Codes Division meet the U.S. Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home, or ZERH, energy performance equivalency by 2023. It's right around the corner, and we're well on our way. Last spring, Executive Order 2004 was signed. This will lead us to the year 2030, where a 60% reduction of the regulated site energy use is achieved when compared to the 2005 ORSC. As mentioned earlier, these are the chapters covered in this presentation. Chapter 11 is the Energy Code. Chapters 12 through 23 are the mechanical provisions, and Chapter 24 is fuel gas. But before we dive into those, the next slide will serve as a refresher for the building types which fall under the scope of the ORSC in Chapter 1. Chapter 1 has been updated to reflect scoping policy, delegated authority, local allowances, and construction standards. The provisions of this code, the ORSC, apply to detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses not more than 3 stories above grade plane in height and their accessory structures. Lodging houses with not more than 5 guest rooms, residential aircraft hangars, and live-work units located in 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses in compliance with the requirements of Section 419 of the Building Code, the Oregon Structural Specialty Code, OSSC. These uses may not utilize the ORSC and must comply with the OSSC. Detached one-family residences used for family child care or foster care and in accordance with ORS Chapters 418, 443, and 329A, and congregate living facilities. Tune into the Chapter 13 Energy Code Change presentation to hear about updates relative to those uses. Let's take a minute to quickly review how Chapter 11 is laid out. There are 3 parts. The first is energy conservation, which is comprised of 8 sections: scope, definitions, alternative systems, the exterior envelope requirements, HVAC systems, piping insulation, lighting and power, and plumbing fixture efficiency. Part 2 is alternative systems analysis and is section NA 1109. Part 3 is a fenestration standard, which is comprised of sections NF 1110 through NF 1116. There are little significant changes to the latter 2 portions. These are the areas where significant changes have taken place, and the presentation is in this order. First, we'll look at scope. Then, we'll review the exterior envelope requirements and associated tables for existing buildings and additions. And we'll also review additional measures, thermal performance calculations, prescriptive envelope requirements, advanced and intermediate framing header insulation, and air leakage. We'll follow that by looking at the HVAC system requirements for insulation and installation of ducts, and the ventilation and furnace fan efficiency. We'll then move to piping insulation and the lighting and power requirements, and finally, plumbing fixture efficiency. Here we'll talk about scope, specifically to the additional measures table. In the 2021 ORSC, a selection of 1 additional measure from table N1101.1 parenthetical 2 will be made instead of 2 selections. If you recall from the 2017 ORSC, this table had additional measure number 5, the air sealing of the home and ductwork. That measure was eliminated from the table and has become the mandatory prescriptive path. This is the reasoning why the additional measures are reduced to the selection of 1. Let's talk about existing buildings for a minute. Here, you will see an update which matches the new building table for skylight fenestration. But what is perhaps more important is that we emphasize an existing provision which has been retained. This is the greatest extent practical provision. For instance, it is almost never practical to saw cut a driveway or footing to install slab edge perimeter insulation for a garage conversion. This, of course, is up to the local building official, but in our estimation, the cons outweigh the pros. Here we offer clarification of large and small addition sizes. The percentage of floor area has been removed and a static condition exists for both large and small additions. 600 square feet or greater is a large addition. Less than that is a small addition. We also increased the small addition exception to 225 square feet. That is based on a 15 by 15-foot room addition. As a refresher, when a small addition is in play, you have to select one measure from the new home's additional measures table or select one measure from table N1101.3. It's important to note that only one measure needs to be selected, while the code language may imply that you must comply with the table in its entirety. So, let's look at the changes we made to the small additions table. First, we simply clarified some language in measure number 3. In measure number 4, we reduced the air changes per hour to 4.5 ACH. This is comparable to the air changes per hour we mentioned later in slide 18. The minimum furnace efficiency level for upgrade matches the federal minimum and has a less than qualifier. For example, if you have a furnace at 90 AFUE, you may keep that furnace, but you must select a different option from the table. Keep in mind that the AFUE level for existing homes is slightly less than the new home requirement. Finally, we made the water heating efficiency match the new home additional measures table. Now, let's take a look at that table. The additional measures table has gone from a select 2 to a select 1. Remember, as we mentioned earlier in this presentation, old additional measure 5, which was home and duct sealing, is now the prescriptive path. Many of these measures you are already familiar with, such as high efficiency mechanical systems and an improved building thermal envelope. There are a couple new measures approved by the RMSB. Those are a reduction in window glazing area relative to the conditioned floor area and improved home air leakage combined with heat recovery ventilation. We will make a new calculator available soon for compliance with additional measure number 6. Now, let's take a further look into how someone might comply with additional measure 6 or even meet code from a performance standpoint. There are a couple ways to use this table. The first is for compliance with additional measure number 6. The proposed design must achieve an overall U factor times the area, the UA, which is 8% less than the baseline UA. The other is for the performance-based method for the building thermal envelope. The proposed UA in this case must just meet or exceed the code UA, but an additional measure would need to be selected. You'll notice that the window U factor has changed. Let's take a look at that and the other changes to the prescriptive envelope requirement table. In the prescriptive path table, you'll see we made a 10% improvement to the window U factor. This is in alignment with the ZERH program. We clarified that below grade walls may have a continuous insulation path or a cavity path. The window area limitation was removed. Finally, the air duct insulation level was removed and placed where it belongs in N1105.2. We'll review that a couple slides from now. Let's briefly take a look at the footnotes. We have eliminated footnotes which no longer apply. We have also added a little clarity to the slab edge insulation depth for new homes. This insulation can run vertical, horizontal, or a combination thereof. It can be on the exterior of the footing or on the interior. We'll be producing a guide with some section drawings for further clarification. Stay tuned. Here, we have made slight changes to the header insulation for both advanced and intermediate framing. Voids 1 to 2 inches in size shall be insulated with R4 per inch insulation. There's no change there, but voids larger than 2 inches shall have a minimum of R10 insulation in total. This insulation is not required to be rigid and does not require a minimum R value per inch. As long as R10 is achieved, that is suitable. Now, let's move along to one of the more impactful changes, air sealing. As we have mentioned earlier, former additional measure number 5 has become the prescriptive path. Here, we are requiring that the building thermal envelope be constructed to limit air leakage. We have emphasized top plate sealing, where all walls in contact with vented attics shall be sealed to the top plate with caulk, sealant, gasket, or other approved material. There are a couple images on the right which represent this condition. Please note that air permeable insulation shall not be used as a sealing material. The RMSB also added some optional language. Either you will comply with Table N1104.8 or the dwelling shall be tested to demonstrate an air leakage not greater than 4.0 ACH 50. Let's take a look at that Table N1104.8 on the next slide. This air sealing table is an overview of the minimum best practices, which is already required in the 2017 ORSC, but we added the specific language as guidance. To the left, you'll see a sample of what an airtight drywall approach may look like on a section drawing. But now, if you would take a minute to pause this video and review the air barrier criteria, that would be helpful. The insulation and installation of ductwork. Here, you'll see that we have moved the R8 insulation requirement from the thermal envelope table to this location. We also made a very impactful change from an energy efficiency standpoint. Now, all new duct systems are required to be located fully within the building thermal envelope. There are a few ways to accomplish this as indicated in the drawing in the upper right corner. However, if that is not feasible for some reason, the ductwork may be deeply buried in insulation. If choosing this route, R19 insulation shall be installed above the ductwork and insulation depth marker flags shall be installed every 10 feet. There's a great depiction of that in the image on the lower right corner. Ventilation and furnace fan efficiency. Here, we have added a new section specifying the efficiency of exhaust and supply ventilation. These both must be Energy Star certified. We have also delineated that furnace fan motors meet the new federal efficiency minimum for ECM motors. Pipe insulation and plumbing efficiency. We have added that domestic hot water piping shall be insulated to a minimum of R3. This is for the first 8 feet of pipe, both into and out of a water heater. Of course, this still applies to pipe located outside the building thermal envelope. But we have also added that recirculating water piping also needs R3 insulation regardless of the length. If you'll note there in the bottom right hand corner, an N1108, we have referred all fixture efficiencies back to the plumbing code. Lighting efficiency. Here we have established new lumens per watt levels in the definition section of this chapter. And we now require that the two fixture exceptions are on a dimmer or automatic control. The solar ready provisions. This is a new section which actually became effective October 1st of last year under the 2017 ORSC. All newly permitted homes should be in compliance with this section. There is no grace period as we are complying with Executive Order 1720. Here again, we'll ask you to pause the presentation and review these new requirements. The picture to the right is taken from the Energy Trust of Oregon's website and is a great example of what this might look like. That concludes the significant changes to the residential energy efficiency section of the 2021 ORSC Chapter 11. Next, we'll take a look at the mechanical changes in chapters 12 through 23. Welcome to Part 5 of the 2021 ORSC, the mechanical chapters 12 through 23. In this portion of the presentation, we'll just cover the significant changes which took place in the chapters bolded below. Chapter 13, General Mechanical System Requirements. Chapter 14, Heating and Cooling Equipment and Appliances. Chapter 15, Exhaust Systems. Chapter 16, Duct Systems. Skipping to Chapter 20 with Boilers and Water Heaters. Then Chapter 21 with Hydronic Piping. And finally, Chapter 23, Solar Energy Systems. Let's dive in. Here we have captured 6 different changes to 3 different chapters. Chapter 13, 1305.1.3.5 pit locations. Simply make sure that appliances, perhaps a furnace in a crawl space for instance, are protected from earthen failures with concrete or masonry. Here's a few from Chapter 15, 1503.2, domestic cooking exhausts. This points to new reference standards for kitchen hoods, microwaves, and other cooking exhaust systems above ranges. 1503.3 exhaust discharge is a return to model code which allows an exception for when a continuous mechanical exhaust is provided with natural ventilation. The final highlight for Chapter 15 is makeup air dampers in 1503.6.2. It's another provision catching up to model code and our mechanical code. This allows for high CFM kitchen range hoods to use a passive gravity damper or an active electronically operated damper. On to Chapter 21 hydronic systems. 2101.10, there's a new test exception for PEX systems. And finally, we've got a couple changes in 2103.2, which adds a new thermal break and thermal barrier requirements. Here we'll cover 2 changes to Chapter 14. The first is an Oregon amendment, which requires the condensate gravity drain pipe to be smooth and rigid enough to maintain slope to the discharge point. These drain pipes shall not be flexible or corrugated pipe. However, pump systems may have flexible pipe as they are not gravity based. And we've also made sure that refrigerant piping is a minimum of R4, which was the intent of a model code table previously referred to, but was unfortunately non-existent in our Chapter 11. There are 2 great examples in the pictures of the code intent. Dryer duct installation and termination. Here, we use some new model language which specifies a minimum dryer duct passageway of not less than 12.5 square inches or a 4-inch diameter. These shall not be diminished or deformed in their cavities. For instance, a 4-inch duct would be deformed in a 2x4 wall since the nominal width of a 2x4 is 3.5 inches. The 4-foot support interval remains, and we also now require that the joints shall be sealed with listed tape only. There is no more allowance for screws which protrude into the duct. Ventilation for rooms with water closets. This clarifies a minor change to R303.3 in that it adds half baths to the requirement of automatically controlled ventilation when a fan is installed. We have tied this directly to M1505.6. Ventilation rates. The first highlight is that exhaust fans must be Energy Star certified. This will not only reduce energy, but also noise. Note that our table differs from model code in that we require 150 CFM versus 100 CFM for domestic kitchen range hoods, and we separate bathroom and water closet rooms. A room with bathing facilities is 80 CFM intermittent or 20 CFM continuous, while a water closet room is 50 CFM when it's provided, and that refers back to the previous slide and R303.3.2. Mechanical ventilation. Again, we keep our reference back to R303.3, which adds rooms with water closets to the mechanical ventilation requirement. Next, in M1505.2, we ensure that range hood and bathing facility exhaust air is exhausted to the outdoors. We also clarify that ductless range hoods are allowed. In 1505.3, there's a minor update referring to new standards. The biggest change, however, is in 1505.4.1, where we now require that every home has a whole house ventilation system and that it is balanced. Balanced means that the air coming in versus the air going out is the same quantity within a 10% range. We've also made sure that the ventilation rate matches model code provisions. This is a big change overall, and there are a few ways to accomplish all of this, and we've provided additional links to more resources on our webpage. Duct system installation and installation. We have removed the allowance of gypsum products for return ducts in new buildings and additions. The volume damper change simply ensures that someone can actually access the damper when they need to. And we have referred back to the Chapter 11 provisions under 1601.4.6 and .4.11. Pool heaters. A simple but important reference and clarification to the proper UL standards. And remember, we do not regulate portable spas, and as such, they are an exception. Our final slide for mechanical is in Chapter 23, Solar Thermal Energy Systems. Here, we ensure that these systems are for non-potable water use, and we have added language relative to access for maintenance. Finally, we cover drain-back solar thermal and ensure that these systems have freeze protection. That concludes the significant changes to the mechanical chapters of the 2021 ORSC. Finally, we'll take a look at the fuel gas changes in Chapter 24. Part 6 of the ORSC is fuel gas. On this slide, we cover changes to sections 2406, 2413, and 2414. In 2406.2, a clothes dryer is now allowed in a bathroom or water closet as long as there is a permanent opening with an area of not less than 100 square inches, which communicates with the space other than a bedroom, etc. In 2413.5, non-corrugated and otherwise smooth stainless steel tubing has new sizing allowance equations. These are the longest length method, the branch method, or a hybrid method. In 2413.7, the operating pressure shall not exceed 5 pounds per square inch except where the joints are flanged and pipe to flange connections are made via welding or brazing. And finally, in 2414.4.2, steel, stainless steel, and wrought iron pipe shall not be lighter than Schedule 10 and shall comply with the dimensional standards listed here. These changes all build upon the previous slide relative to the changes in Section 2414. First, in 2414.5.2, stainless steel tubing has new ASTM references. In 2414.10.1, pipe joints Schedule 40 and heavier shall be threaded, flanged, brazed, welded, or assembled with press connect fittings. Pipe lighter than Schedule 40 can be all of those except for threaded. In 2414.10.3, stainless steel tubing joints shall be welded, assembled with approved tubing fittings, brazed with a material having a specific melting point or higher, or assembled with listed press connect fittings. And finally, in 2414.10.5, metallic fittings used with steel, stainless steel, or wrought iron pipe need to be steel, stainless steel, copper alloy, malleable iron, or cast iron. Okay, moving on to some new sections. 2415.14. This allows piping or an enlisted encasement system to be utilized beneath buildings if or when needed. 2415.17.3 allows other products specifically designed for the purpose of tracer wire to be used as tracer wire. 2418.2 is an Oregon amendment. Piping shall be supported with pipe hooks, straps, etc., which are suitable for the size of the piping, but they do not have to be metal. In 2420.6, shutoff valves installed in tubing systems need to be independent of the tubing, rigid, and securely supported. And finally, in 2447.2, there's a new exception which allows the installation of commercial appliances if designed by a licensed professional engineer and is in compliance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. So, if you want that commercial deep fat fryer in your kitchen, you can have it. It just needs to meet the exception. The installation of insulation shields, 2427.5.10, adds that insulation shields are required for factory-built chimneys. You'll see this matches the language for vents in 2426.4. There's no change there. We just show it for reference. That concludes the significant changes to the fuel gas chapter. On the next and final slide, we list additional resources for your reference. Well, that concludes the entire presentation for chapters 11 through 24. You may want to pause here and jot down these additional resources. Thank you for watching and for listening.